Welcome everybody to Practical Psychology Podcast, episode 47. My name is Joseph Wong. I'm one of the co-hosts. Today we are very happy to have Brittney Larsen, registered clinical counselor in Nelson, BC, joining us for another episode in the series Transition into Parenthood. Thank you, Brittney.
Thank you, Joseph, for having me.
So Brittney, we have been talking a little bit about communications and conflict. Please tell us more today.
Yeah. So this is one of the most important things I want people to hear from this series. So conflict is normal and actually really necessary in any healthy relationship. The problem isn't actually the conflict itself. It's those unresolved or repeated conflicts, or conflict that's managed poorly and often in a blaming sort of way. Um, People are probably familiar, or if they're listening to a psychology podcast, they've probably heard of John Gottman. He's one of the biggest researchers for relationship psychology, and he's able to tell. It's really like 95 or 96% accuracy, how healthy a couple is and whether they're likely to make it long term based on their communication patterns. And so if there's things like the four horsemen that he speaks about, which are contempt, criticism, defensiveness, or stonewalling, it's much more likely that a couple will not make it in the long run. And these are not skills we are naturally born with. So if anyone's thinking, oh no, we're not going to make it, you can learn these skills.
I love the data, Brittany, because you're mentioning a psychology research, which is a watershed moment.
Mhm.
Conflict is normal and necessary and is healthy. Conflict
Yeah.
is not causing the problem, it's unresolved conflict. It's almost linked to saying exercise is healthy, even though we naturally avoid it. We need to do it more often in a proper way rather than injuring ourselves.
Yes, exactly. So a couple can argue really frequently and still be thriving as long as they're using effective resolution skills. So, like you said, with a runner, you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I don't want to go for a run, even if you're someone who runs every single day. Um, but you know that you'll feel better after you do it. It has lots of benefits. And in the long term, you'll feel better. And also in the long term, each run itself will be easier the more consistently you do it. So the same thing is true for conflict. So our autonomic nervous system responds to, it's trying to keep us comfortable. It's trying to keep us comfortable and safe, and often fights against discomfort or things that can be perceived as dangerous. And in this case, it's danger to the security of your relationship. By bringing up something hard, it seems like it could lead to bad things that will end the relationship. But what the research shows is that actually the more you engage in those type of conversations, the easier they get because you know that it will be resolved and that there is the safety in your relationship to have difficult conversations.
Brittany, let's dive into the deep end about communications, managing disagreement and conflict. A
Mhm.
lot of people will talk about this in couple family counseling is the lack of safety.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
we create safety before communication?
Yes, that's a really important question. So first of all, we think about love in this, there's three different types of love. And one of them is your friendship love. So protecting the friendship at the core is really important for that safety because it's the foundation that gets you through the moments that are harder because you trust the person, and that trust is built over time and it can be rebuilt
Yes.
when it's been broken, especially with that friendship. So staying curious about your partner's inner world is really important. Their hopes and their fears, about parenthood specifically, because that's the conversation we're having, but about anything really. Um, and not just their to-do list. because you can easily get sucked into the sort of logistics of your life, especially after a baby arrives, and just completely avoid having any conversation that could lead to conflict. Because in the moment, it seems like not a big deal. Like, well, is this really worth bringing up? And sometimes that's valid, but that's more being
Mm.
curious about yourself and why you feel it's a good thing to bring up. Maybe first be curious with yourself about why you need to have this conversation, because then you go in more prepared to have the conversation as well, because you're more clear about your own feelings and wants and needs.
So, Brittany, one of the things is to create safety rather than coming into the room confrontational, critical, to escalate the conflict is to create safety by being curious, to
Yeah.
craft this friendship process rather than just being roommates and workmates. To do
Yeah.
this.
And lovers too. Like having that like
Yeah.
romantic love is very important, but it's not what's going to get you through some of these more challenging periods of
Yeah.
being a couple. And the transition into parenthood is actually the most challenging transition.
Okay. So I write it down here. So what are other strategies for people coming into a conversation discussing some taboo, tough subjects? How do they create
Yeah.
safety for themselves and others?
Yeah. So there's some specific communication skills that are really helpful here. Um, it's really nuanced for each couple. So that's why going to counseling can be really helpful to sort of explore the specifics for your relationship and your family system and like everyone that's impacting the couple's lives, sort of seeing what the specifics are for them. Because some things that make some people defensive will not make other people defensive. So knowing that type of thing is really important. So that's where counseling really comes in. Because what I'm about to tell you, some specific skills, but they sound simple, but they take a lot of practice and often require some guidance from a counselor that's specific to the couple or the individual. So um, if I seem vague, that is why.
Oh, oh yeah, pretty because different people have different sort of humor, jokes, way of talking of things, and a different expression style. Some people like to just sit and talk in a more formal settings. Other people might be they like the informal, talk a little bit here, talk a little bit there, like evolving conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And so learning the specific things to both people in the couple is really important. And then how that interacts as well. Because everyone perceives things differently and communicates differently, just like you said. And so
Yeah.
one of the first skills, I'd call it like needs expression. So learning to articulate your own needs and without blame. So I say that really slowly, without blame, because it is very challenging to articulate your own needs clearly without blaming or even hinting at blaming. Because sometimes you don't even think you're placing blame, but an outside observer would be able to tell that there's a hidden agenda underneath your words that is blame. Yeah.
Needs without blaming. I can immediately see individuals, including us, when people are stressed, sometimes their thought really think it's really this person. He or she did something, that's why we won't be here. That sort of thing. It can be very strong feelings, even though the facts might be different. Or
Yes.
sometimes maybe it is true, but yeah.
But yeah, the reaction is maybe outsized or not all of the facts are being considered or there's so many factors. That's why I kind of gave the disclaimer about how challenging this can be. So one of the things that happens when couples become parents is that both partners' needs become more intense at the same time as their needs become much less visible to each other and even to themselves because they're doing so much and they're taking on these big new roles while also maintaining the other roles in their lives.
Oh
So
yeah.
everyone's
So it just
depleting.
points to this conversation is way more important and more needed because the couple actually have more needs, less invisible, less visible. and they need
Yeah.
to initiate this needs-based conversation.
Yeah. And so we talk about in
Yeah.
times of stress for couples, dyadic coping can be really great, which that means essentially how couples manage stress together.
Okay, yeah.
So couples who use active and joint communication strategies,
Mhm.
they sustain their relationship quality and navigate that transition much better than those people who cope in isolation. So instead of
Okay.
facing and managing the stress together and trying to do it individually.
And Brittany, you also mentioned about the needs without blaming here. It brings up another important topic because a lot of people, including myself, we have this assumption that people will just show up to support our needs. But a
Yeah,
lot of times, if we don't ask, other people really they don't know.
exactly. So that's where that curiosity comes back in. So being curious about your partner and being curious about yourself and then communicating the things that are relevant and important because yeah, people are not mind readers. And honestly, people making assumptions usually does not lead to good things anyway. So even if they are trying to read your mind, they're not doing it very well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this quote, don't ask, don't tell. But I guess in this setting is don't ask, then don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Don't
Yeah.
ask, don't know.
We need to make a slogan here.
Exactly. And so when you're asking, it's super important to use what's called a softened startup. So, how you initiate a difficult conversation really, really, really matters. So, coming back to Gottman again,
Okay.
his research shows that, yeah, 90 something percent of the time, a conversation ends the way that it begins. So,
Wow.
if you start a conversation with a criticism or blaming or you always do this or you never do that, the conversation is going to escalate. Um, so people are going to go on the defensive. Their nervous system is going to try to protect them, and sometimes even they go into they lose the ability to think. So the front of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, goes offline, and the amygdala is now in charge. So you go from thinking to reacting from a place of anxiety, and your emotions are running the show, not the part that's rational and thinking and wanting to be connected to your partner.
Wow. So how we start the conversation is already dictating the stage of how it's going to end. There's a big concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research around it. So, if
Okay.
you
Yeah.
instead start a conversation with, I feel, and then a specific and non-blaming description of that situation, you create more of a safe place for that repair to happen. So,
Yeah.
I was trying to think of an example, like, um, when I feel overwhelmed when we immediately try to solve the problem and I don't feel heard
Yeah.
is a really common one because as humans, we jump into problem solving mode. But what's happening is people then don't feel heard or understood. So sometimes that can be a hard one to communicate because then the partner, if you don't express it in a soft startup, they'll get defensive and say, but I'm just trying to help. Why won't you listen to me? I'm just trying to help. But the person you're trying to help is an adult who probably already had that thought of how to fix it. They just need that connection to feel like they can ride through the uncomfortableness of whatever it is you're facing together. Not, they don't need you to solve it. They need you to be there with them and just hear them.
Yeah. It's interesting here, Brittany, because you mentioned about the soft startup needs expression without blaming.
Mhm.
And now you teach us another concept here about delay the problem solving, connect first.
Connect first.
because the other partner is intelligent, but we
Mhm.
need to connect before problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
And the problem solving comes from good intentions. So it's not like but just being aware that that's not going to get you what you're hoping for. It's actually going to delay any sort of problem solving that might be possible. So, a really great way for the person to respond to the soft startup and I feel statements, those sorts of expressions, is active listening, which is not just actually hearing what your partner is saying, but demonstrating that you've understood what they said.
no, active listening. Okay.
Yeah. And so you and I, as counselors, we've received formal training in how to do this. But at a much more basic level, it's really possible for couples to use this quite well. And basically, one of the main things is reflecting back what your partner said, not interpreting it through your lens, reflecting back exactly
Oh,
what they said, um, tolerating silence. So, not jumping in to fill those moments where someone might be thinking or processing information. Um, and then also responding to their emotional cues rather than that immediate problem solving, as we were just talking about. And because, like I was saying before, like they probably don't need help necessarily with the problem solving part of it. Um, So, in a clinical context, we sometimes call that like
oh.
listening to understand rather than listening to respond.
Listening to understand rather than responding.
Yeah. And you don't have to agree with what your partner's saying either. Because I think that's another part of this where people can then jump in and try to convince their partner that what they're feeling is silly or what they're worrying about doesn't matter. Or like there's a lot of invalidating that can happen when you're trying to even buy into what your partner's saying. It's not as much about agreeing as understanding that that is the real experience for your partner.
Well, Brittany, here, I want to pause a little bit here to point out there's a fundamental paradigm shift with this sort of relationship science thinking
Hmm.
compared to the regular day-to-day myth. Because for most people, when they go into a conflict, disagreement, their focus is to problem solve something like very concrete. But now that we are talking about it, the thing that is causing the problems that they're trying to problem solve is not related to problem solving. It's related to connections.
Yes,
So the
exactly.
more try to solve a problem, they cannot solve the cause.
Yeah.
It's a paradigm shift, totally completely opposite direction.
Yes. And so, as someone who is a perfection or recovering perfectionist and people pleaser, I tend to, in my past, jump into things full on and try to be as efficient as possible at everything. So, actually, above my computer right now, I have a sticky note that says, slow down to speed up. And essentially, for me, what that means is that listen to understand, not to respond.
Yeah.
Because it actually will progress your relationship much faster than trying to convince someone of something they're not ready to hear yet, or maybe ready to hear at all.
Yeah. So this is very important because the more we delay problem solving, the more effective the communication and more safe and less critical it will be.
Yes. And all of that, like trying to problem solve and convince your
Oh,
partner that what they're saying isn't valid, it actually disconnects you as a couple. So it's doing the opposite of what the person is trying to do, which is end whatever uncomfortableness is happening, solve the problem, let's move on. But what ends up happening is you're dismissing your partner, or I mean, many other things other than dismissing. But and then what happens is you're more disconnected than when you began, and your partner is seeking connection. That's why they're talking to you about any number of important things, even if they're hard things.
wow. So create safety Also need to create connections and delay some of these conversation killers or problem
Yeah.
solving.
Yes, because what can happen then um, is the reaction of stonewalling, which I mentioned before, which is when people just shut down and won't talk about it anymore. Which
Mm.
that is it's something for that person to work on because that's not helpful and
Mhm.
hurtful actually, and can be weaponized against people, oftentimes not
Yeah.
intentionally, um,
Okay, yeah,
but it's
yeah,
creating like, okay, I'm done with this conversation and therefore it's over.
yeah. The stonewalling, defensiveness, and
Mhm.
then contempt and criticism.
Yes, which are the like, you always, you never, those are a good place to
Mhm.
start, is removing always and never from any of these conversations,
Yeah, wow.
which sounds
And next
simple,
year,
but it's
Brittany, I
not.
want to ask a little bit about this, because now we talk about the conversation, the timeline, create safety, the soft startup needs expression without blaming, delay problem solving. It looks like we have a good working model here. I want to go back to the beginning here. How can an individual create safety even before creating safety for other people? It's like people who um as first they help themselves first before helping other people, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So in this context, for example, so when couples are sleep deprived and stressed and which is most new parents, their nervous systems are more reactive. And so a really important skill is physiological self-regulation during conflict is a really great place to start
Yes.
because anyone who already has a child probably knows that if your child is having a tantrum when they're a toddler and you come in with the same energy that they have, the tantrum is going to escalate. If you come in with a calmer, like even if you don't feel calm inside, but if you come in with calmness, eventually you will help to co-regulate your child. But so it's a similar thing in couples. If you are not able to regulate your own body, your partner will pick up on that and they likely will become more activated in their nervous system too. So,
Yeah.
and then also that can mean that they reach an experience of flooding faster, which is sort of that
Oh.
state where you can't take in any more information or problem solve at all.
Brittany here. How do people get more in tune about their physiological? For a lot of people, maybe they're working, when they come home, they don't know that they're escalated in the physiological or dysregulation.
Yes, so that is a really interesting one. A lot of us, especially as adults, were not taught how to recognize emotions in our body because that wasn't something
Mm.
discussed commonly back then. So even
Yeah.
though you can recognize that you're feeling, say, like once an emotion is fully there already, you can
Mm.
recognize that you're sad or mad or happy or any of kind of the more basic ones that you can recognize in yourself. But what we miss is that we have a lot of little signals along the way before the big emotion comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, it comes out of nowhere because something happens right in front of you. But like you said, on a work day, you've had all these little things that have happened to you through the day that you've been managing in your body. But we're not aware of them a lot of the time. And so through the day, your body becomes more and more tense or more and more like sending you signals that, like, hey, let's deal with this. And then you come home, and transitions can be challenging, like transitioning from your workday to home. And especially if you come home to a screaming baby and an exhausted partner who's like crying and having a hard time that in that moment, you've just sent your nervous system completely over the edge. Your body is like, I don't have space for this right now. I just had a whole day myself too. And so, which is valid, but learning how to pause and either notice those or take the time to regulate proactively. So a really great one that's people like to dismiss because it sounds so simple. And I am one of those people when I'm starting to get activated in my body. When someone tells me to take a deep breath, I want to scream. But it works. What happens? So one of the easiest ones to reach for is called box breathing. And the reason that it's easy is because it's counts of 4. So you breathe in for 4 counts, 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold it for 4 counts, 1, 2, 3, 4. And actually most effective is if you breathe out for double. So 8. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then hold that for 4. And then start over again by breathing in. And what happens is it calms your whole body. It works your lungs and your heart, bring everything down. And all of a sudden, you can access the thinking part of your brain. So the key is actually to do these throughout the day to help proactively regulate.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time we don't notice what's happening in our body. And it takes a lot of time to start recognizing it if you've never paid attention before. So a really great place to start is being proactive like that. So doing that box breathing practice 4 times in the car before you walk inside, or
Okay.
doing it 4 times in the kitchen before you walk into the living room to have a hard conversation with your partner,
Mhm.
so that you know that you're coming at it from a place of calm.
Wow. So, Brittany, today we have amazing idea about the technicality of communications, about the whole workflow, creating safety, right, and being critical, going into the soft startup, the needs-based communication without blaming to avoid the four horsemen.
Mhm.
We also talk about how, even before this process, how to create their own safety, the box breathing, the physiological regulation before going into conversations. There's a lot in here. And what is the take home message you want to give to the viewers and fellow clinicians before we end?
Yeah. So it's hard to be succinct about a topic that is so huge, and I've barely scratched the surface at all. So I think the key is to be curious. Be curious with your own body. Be curious with your own emotions and wants and needs and feelings. Be curious with your partner by asking how they're doing and what's going on with them internally. And also what might be happening for them if they're not acting like their best self. Be curious, not judgmental, and don't condemn them. Have a conversation, even when it's hard.
Wow. Thank you, Brittany, for your words of wisdom for today. We're very happy to have you, and we will have you back ASAP for the next episode to continue this wonderful topic.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. And thank you, everyone.